Florida State baseball fans. Safe to say the Florida State baseball team has had, it's hard to ask for much more from a first half of the season they've had. I figured who better than to bring in Teddy Cahill of Baseball America, the head college baseball guy over there to talk about the team. And Teddy, I appreciate you very much making the time with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great time when you're talking Florida State this year.
Yeah, we booked this last week, and I was, of course, worried that the bottom was going to fall out a little. It was going to be a bad weekend, or maybe Florida would finally get it. It would have been totally understandable if Florida got them. That's a very good Florida team, and yet it was more the same last night at Hauser. Pretty remarkable how that series has gone this year.
Yeah, I mean, like so many times I've been on the college beat since 2016, and so obviously, pretty much every time you think about that Florida State series, it's just been Florida dominating it. And I can't tell you how many times I've tweeted or written something like Kevin O'Sullivan is like only lost to Florida State 6 times or whatever it is, like, and or Miami or any of their rivals. Like, he has just owned every rivalry. And the way that this has unfolded this year, especially the way that Florida State has hit the Florida arms, like that's been the thing that's really stood out to me as much as sweeping the series. It's just what they've done pitching wise. And now this Florida staff is the worst Florida staff of pick an amount of time. Like right now, their ERA is over 6. But that's still something that had really been a struggle, that was the differentiating factor between those two teams, was just what Florida could do on the mound. And so to see it shift so dramatically this year has been striking.
Yeah, I didn't even know the circumstances really until Link told us last night after the game. They had some trouble getting back from Boston. They didn't get back to Tallahassee till about 2:30 Monday morning. So I would even think that's a chance where it's understandable for maybe not the most energetic game, but they put up, I think it was 12 runs in the first 3 innings. And yeah, I guess I brought you on a lot of it, Teddy. I know you there was some frustration, I would say, from the fan base of maybe people late to adopting to belief in this team. I think you were one of the earlier adopters in belief in what this Florida State team could be. I guess when did that really click in for you? When did you see, I guess, the vision of what this could be? And because you were here opening day, I should say, you happened to be at Hauser. I don't think it was because you thought incredibly highly of this team, but I guess what was it about this team that made you believe earlier than I feel like a lot of the other national guys?
Yeah, so I mean, like, I think that there wasn't any one moment. Like early on, they were playing very well. I think we finally ranked them, and I say finally, I know other people took longer, but I think we ranked them after the 3rd weekend. Maybe it was even after the 2nd weekend. I could look that up. But like the point is that nothing they did in those first couple weeks was really anything that was like, yes, like I've seen it now. It was more just like looking around and looking at how they were doing it, looking at how deep the lineup was, and then, just kind of a belief in the starting pitching. And Cam Leiter, the night I saw him, was incredible, of course. But Arnold became, has clearly made such a big jump. And so seeing some of those things and putting it together, like the fact that they hadn't lost for, you see, it's baseball. Weird losses happen. And, the more that they just kept avoiding that, the more it was like, this is something different. And, I do have to give credit to my colleague, Peter Flaherty, who he was right there and with me in terms of Florida State. It wasn't like he was holding me back or I was holding him back. Like we were just both looking at the same thing and coming to the same conclusion. And, that's why we ranked them. Like, I do understand, like, other outlets, like, you don't want to throw away your preseason stuff too early because you spend a lot of time coming into the belief about certain teams. And, 1 weekend, 2 weekends, how much can you really take from that? But I think that despite the fact that the schedule wasn't very good, you could start to see why this Florida State team could be different than it had been, or than you had expected it to be, or that it had been the year before.
Well, and the Link Jarrett factor certainly goes into that as well. I think, obviously he came here for a reason, and he's a guy who's had success everywhere he's been, had pretty remarkable success at Notre Dame, which is not an easy place to do that at. I guess I know last year was a weird year, some circumstances out of his control, some bad luck on top of it, but are you surprised how quickly he's gotten this team to where it is now?
I guess in some respects, yes, and in other respects, no. Like he flipped Notre Dame really fast, and I think a lot of people would have been better served paying attention to like the Link Jarrett history of it all. Um, of course, a lot of people were slow to realize how good Notre Dame was. I was early on that too. So, maybe I just am an early Link Jarrett adopter. But like the issues from a year ago, I was a little surprised that he was able to flip that in one off season. But some of the issues that, or the ways he's corrected those issues weren't about flipping things. They were just about player development. Jamie Arnold got better. Like I said, Cam Smith got better. Like some of these players that were there got better with another full season of development. And that's the way things should work. Like, yes, portal supplement was important and traditional recruiting supplementing was important, but some of this stuff is just player development, and Link Jarrett, has been very good at that. And bringing in Micah Posey definitely helps with that as well. Like if you look at what he did at DBU, like there's a lot of player development pedigree on this coaching staff, and so I think the combination of being able to get in the portal quickly and get what you want, and obviously everybody would rather be distracted by the NCAA tournament and while they're trying to recruit out of the portal and recruit, but like they didn't have that distraction. And so they were able to really focus, figure out what they needed and address it as quickly as possible. So I think all of those things kind of come together in a perfect way.
Yeah, that's literally a column I wrote at the end of last season, was just like they did not get that the first offseason because of that miracle Omaha run and beating Tennessee and all that. But just talk about, Link obviously plays a big role in the offense. You talked about it's an interesting combination, that group of guys who they convinced to stay. James Tibbs could have easily, I'm sure, gone a number of other places and had a great bit of success. Same for Cam Smith, same for Jaime Ferrer. Each of those guys are back and has taken a step. And then you look at, it seems like the portal hit rate has been pretty exceptionally high. I guess just what stands out about, the offense, I guess from my perspective, I'm curious yours. It seems like it's one of the deeper lineups in the country, or just like it can be 1 through 9 any given night. You don't see that a ton in college baseball.
Yeah, I do think that that's one of the things that you look at right away is just the depth of what they're running out there. Like you look, last night you see Florida and you see some really, really good hitters there, and like Shelton and Caglione, and they have a number of guys like that. But then you also see at the bottom of the lineup, it's not quite the same. And I'm not here to say that like there's no drop off in the Florida State lineup once you get to the bottom end, but I think that the depth is one of those real pieces. And then I also think they do a good job of everyone drives the ball, and they do a good job of managing the strike zone. And those are two Link Jarrett hallmarks, and I think they are also just Florida State hallmarks. Like I think that stuff has been baked into what Florida State baseball is for decades now. And so for them to be showing that kind of power and that kind of patience at the plate, I do think is a significant factor to what they're doing.
Yeah, I guess we should say, obviously there are many parts of that. It is kind of but James Tibbs, certainly the biggest part of that, the stats on the screen. Just what he's done. I think he's the national leader in RBIs too at 54, slugging at a crazy level, just doing it all, can go the other way. I think last night struck out as the 10th time he struck out all season in like 100 plus at bats. I guess I have to imagine he's the guy who's helped his stock. I know you dabble in the draft stuff some. I guess what's it been like seeing the player he's become, and I guess how much has he helped himself, do you think, in terms of draft stock through what he's done through 32 games this season?
Yeah, it definitely is. It has certainly helped him, and for him to get up there and control the strike zone the way that he does and still hit for power. He hasn't sacrificed power. I think like those are two things that the pro scouts really are going to notice, that, you're walking more than twice the amount of times you're striking out, and you're like, he has more home runs and more doubles than he does strikeouts. And so I think that is a big deal. You're looking at him as a potential like top 50-ish pick, I think. And, if he continues this, maybe he could creep higher. He's not playing like a premium position necessarily. And so that, there is some amount of like how the draft plays out works into that. But I think that a guy with that level of production, with that level of the ability to control the plate and hit for power, I think all of that is really helping him come July.
Yeah, and another guy, I guess we can ask about Cam Smith as well. I think he's the guy who probably came in with higher draft stock, does play a bit more of a premium position. And I think where is he at draft stock wise? He's obviously, unfortunately for Florida State, one of the draft eligible sophomore guys, where this is going to be it for him however long this season goes.
Yeah, he's looking like a first rounder, and like that's kind of the potential that was in him when he showed up. And like it wasn't always clean last year, of course. Like he had some freshman moments and he had to grow into it. But then what he did over the summer and what he's done since then has really kind of solidified that. And so, yeah, you're looking at him as a potential, not just a first rounder. You could see him, in the top 20, maybe in the top half of the first round. And it's, it's all of the physicality, the hitting for power. He's really improved as a defender, and I think that will help him as well when scouts really start breaking down where he lands in the first round.
We've talked about the pitching staff. We've talked about, I think that conversation has to start, I think, with Micah Posey. Obviously, I don't think it was at all the fault of Chuck Ristano, a lot of what happened with the pitching staff last year. I think he was kind of dealt a bad hand and made the most of it. And when they lost, I mean, there were so many questions that they had to keep Wyatt Crowell out of the weekend rotation. And then when they tried to move him in the weekend rotation, he ended up picking up an elbow injury and needing Tommy John. And from there, their pitching staff was just kind of screwed, to put it bluntly. It was never going to go well. But to see what Micah's done, both, I mean, with the guys they brought in, and I think credit to Ristano, he helped kind of really add the transfers they did before leaving to go take the job at Navy. But what stands out about Micah, both from, I mean, I'm sure you've covered him for a number of years, from his time at DBU and elsewhere to now, I mean, at a place like Florida State, I have to imagine he's a head coach in the near future.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what his ultimate future plans are. He's a guy that, you could, if he wanted to be a head coach, I think that's on the table. If he wants to explore pro ball, I bet pro ball would be pretty interested in what he has to bring. Like these pitching coaches, and we haven't really seen a hitting coach make that kind of jump, but a pitching coach certainly has that in them. And he's a guy that is, he's really adept at some of the newer level, like tech and analytics and all of that, and all of the things that go into pitch shaping and sequencing. And he does a good job at helping guys with that. And, that's something that DBU has been really at the forefront of since Wes Johnson, now the head coach at Georgia, previously the pitching coach for LSU, Arkansas, Mississippi State, and the Minnesota Twins. Like when he was at DBU, he kind of started that. And so now everyone that comes through DBU has been able to be a part of that. And so I think Micah brings some of that. And I have to imagine that helped, that's helped, because everybody, when you look at the returners, it seems like pretty much everyone's gotten better. And some of that's their own stuff. Like the pitching coach can only help you so much. But some of that is also just getting new eyes on a pitcher and a pitcher's data and figuring out what works for them and, how you go about maximizing what they're bringing to the table. And I think that he's done a good job with that, certainly with Jamie Arnold, but with the rest of the staff as well.
Yeah, we should talk about Jamie Arnold for sure, because he's the biggest. I mean, he's the national leader in ERA. He's really been stellar in each of his 8 starts so far this season. And I don't know if you saw, Florida State's going to be down 2 weekend starters this weekend, and we can talk about that in a second. It might be a minute for Cam Leiter. We'll see. And Connor Whitaker, Link was pretty non-committal, but he kind of said it was we'll see when or if he can be back, which you never want to hear that. That's never a great thing to hear. But Jamie has been that rock that they really needed him to be. I mean, they tried him as a starter last year. It didn't really take. I know he went up on the Cape and really seemed like he found something up there. I guess what stands out about Jamie, and I guess I don't know how far ahead draft-wise you look, but where is he in terms of a next year draft board? Because he's not a draft-eligible sophomore.
Well, I think the thing that stands out with him is just the control that he pitches with. He's not like sometimes you would say that about a lefty and people get ideas about him being soft tossing, and that's not who he is. But he is just pounding the strike zone relentlessly, and they're quality strikes. They're not just get me over strikes. He is like the command is there and the control is there. And so for me, like that's where it starts with him, but like he has good stuff as well, and the stuff has ticked up since last season. And like those two things together, being able to attack and throw quality strikes with good stuff. You know, I mean, if you're talking about a fastball that now is up to 95 and has a lot of movement, like that is a little bit different than what he was doing as a freshman. And so I think these two things are definitely working in concert. Where is he going to land in next year's draft? I mean, you know, there aren't a whole lot of pitchers out there that are having better seasons. I mean, like there's no one basically having a clearly better season than him, at least as an underclassman. I think you can start looking at and wondering, is he the best pitcher in next year's draft class? Like, I don't think that's a crazy thing at all to look at. Now, there are some pitchers that are good that have dealt with some injury stuff, and maybe they come back and they take that mantle from him when they get back on the mound and back up to speed. But right now, I don't really see anyone that's clearly ahead of him. So where does that mean? I don't know, but that's a first rounder and probably a top half of the first rounder.
Yeah, and that staff, and when you look at it, they are down the two guys this weekend, and we'll see when they get Leiter and or Whitaker back. They're down, I think, a bullpen arm in Gavin Adams, who I think they were counting on having. Ben Barrett they haven't had in over a month, who I know they were counting on as a major arm. I mean, the fact that they lead the ACC, are in the top 10 nationally in ERA, I guess what's it been like seeing, I mean, not just Jamie, but it goes far beyond Jamie, just how that staff has really rounded out. And I mean, if you pull out that one weekend at Clemson, and those things happen, I've seen complaints about bipolar bullpen from the fan base. And frankly, I think you could know as well as anyone, every college bullpen is going to be bipolar. There's just no such thing as a good college bullpen. But I mean, their ERA would probably be below 3 on the year if you take out that Clemson weekend.
Yeah, I mean, short of Arkansas, no one has had like a terribly consistent bullpen nationally. Like it's hard to do. And so, yeah, I mean, like I think that what they've been able to, like when I talked to Link, I don't know, it was early in the season when I like jumped in with, like, we had ranked Florida State, but like at some point I jumped in with both feet and was like, and wrote something about why I thought Florida State was actually good and deserving of everything that wasn't coming their way in terms of rankings and stuff. When I talked to Link for that, like he just kept naming off like pitcher after pitcher after pitcher. And it wasn't just like, oh, like I want to make sure that like this guy, you know, it gets mentioned. It was like, these guys are all, you know, contributing. Like Joe Charles and Brennan Oxford have like really taken, you know, a big load, but like to have those guys at the back of, or at call in the bullpen when you need, like, I mean, I think that's a big deal. And the depth, like, has been tested, and like it still has been pretty solid. And I think that is maybe the best thing that you can say about them, because you are going to have injuries. You are going to have guys that have bad weekends or bad stretches. That is just part of baseball, and especially part of college baseball. So for them to already have like encountered some of that stuff and come out on the other side, or just continuing to find answers, to me, that says a lot about this pitching staff.
Yeah, pitcher injuries, obviously a major talking point across really all levels of baseball right now. Feels like it's really ramped up. My Braves have been affected, unfortunately, and FSU has too. I think Link noted today, I mean, it kind of talked about, you know, not all these guys are dealing with the same thing. It's different things that popped up for everyone. But how much do you think, I'm curious, someone who covers the larger picture of college baseball, to me, it feels like the weird schedule where Florida State, their Clemson series got pushed back to start on Saturday because of weather. Then they started the next week on a Thursday because of Easter. Then it was Friday. They're back on Thursday this week. How much does the wonkiness of schedule, I know they do that for the national TV games, do you think that can have an impact of throwing off these guys who normally are in a rhythm a little more than maybe a professional?
You would hope that that wouldn't be the case, because if that is the case, like, then that causes a whole lot of other like issues and questions. But I don't think it's outlandish to wonder about it, because like in the big leagues, right? Like you're part of a 5-man rotation and you get used to pitching every 5th day. Well, in college, you mostly get used to pitching once a week, and now you're being asked to pitch on one day shorter of rest, and like, what does that do to you? And I think a lot of programs are like very on top of making sure, like, well, okay, like the schedule is going to do this week, and so we're going to hold them a little bit shorter or whatever. But like, when you're talking about biomechanical stuff, like, younger bodies respond in different ways. Sometimes that's a very positive thing, but sometimes that also means that they're not built up in the same way to handle the same kind of thing. So there are so many different factors that go into any pitching injury, and it would be hard for me to imagine that this is a major factor, but it also seems like something that could potentially be factoring in. There is a lot of college baseball. You get used to pitching once a week, and anytime you alter a routine, that can cause stresses that are unusual.
Yeah, so I'm curious. Looking at your NCAA tournament predictions you do for Baseball America, you had Florida State as the number 3 overall seed last week. They are again today. I just looked to see. I hadn't seen today's yet. I'm curious. Obviously, Florida State not that high in the polls, although I think a lot of that is really the one weekend. Is the discrepancy there? That is it? You just think the projection wise going forward, you like Florida State? Is that the metrics like Florida State? Is it all of the above? What goes into you being so high on Florida State in your projection?
It's a combination of the metrics. Florida State's number 3 in RPI right now, and a projection going forward. Like, once you get an RPI that high, assuming that you don't we are deep enough into the season that is Florida State would really have to really work to screw up that kind of RPI. Now, it's not necessarily going to stay at 3, but in terms of just getting into the top 8, once you've done the work of getting there, now it becomes harder to fall. And so then I also look at well, okay, do I like Florida State going forward? And I do. I think playing in the ACC is helping it, both from a metric standpoint and from a there is a bit of a delineation in this conference that some of the other leagues don't have yet. You look at the Big 12 and it feels like anybody can beat anyone any weekend, and there's a lot of evidence of that. And the SEC is such a rock fight every weekend, no matter what you're talking about. But the ACC has kind of stratified a bit. And now after this weekend, Florida State has 2 tough road series, but I like the schedule in May as well. So all of these factors are coming together. But a large piece of it is I like Florida State a fair amount, and the metrics agree with me.
You talked about the ACC. I would love to hear kind of what your thoughts on the conference. Obviously, you've got, it feels like I'm not sure any team's going to get beyond 2021 ACC conference. It just feels like it is a pretty much anyone can beat anyone type conference. Florida State, as good as they are, is 7-5. And so I guess what do you think of the ACC, and I guess where Florida State fits in there?
I wouldn't rule out Clemson running off 24 conference wins or something. They're sitting at 10-2 right now, and they've already played Florida State. As a whole, I like the conference. It looks relatively deep, though not as deep as it seemed in the first month of the season. We now know that Pitt is not that good, and Notre Dame seems okay, but can't win ACC games. So those, we found our bottom in the league. We seem to have found our top. You look at Clemson, Florida State, UNC, UVA. To me, that's, and I guess Duke, that's the top tier. Everything in the middle is a little soft though. And, so you have last week, you have Louisville sweeping NC State, and you have Wake Forest sweeping Virginia Tech, and like a lot of these things in the middle still feel fluid, and maybe Wake Forest can get into that top tier. But I think you have some elite teams. Like I look at Clemson and Florida State and UNC in that way. And I see some teams that really can do some damage in the NCAA tournament, but I also see some teams that I'm still trying to figure out in the middle of the league.
Yeah, this being rivalry week, we'll end talking about, there was Florida last night. It's Miami this weekend. I guess obviously the record doesn't blow you away. I know they haven't been particularly good in ACC play. I guess what is the state of Miami? Kind of how do you think they match up with Florida State this weekend, especially, I mean, at Hauser? And I know I think at least one of the games, if not more, is already sold out.
In the micro, like Miami is, I guess they're not confusing. I was going to say they're a little confusing. I actually don't think they're that confusing. They're a team that is good enough to beat anyone at home. Like they've shown that. They won a series against UVA or against UNC, and UVA at home. On the road, they're not quite as good. They lost a series at Notre Dame. Those are the only two ACC wins Notre Dame has is beating Miami. So getting them at Hauser is significant because for whatever reason this year, like the Mark Light magic is very real down there. And so if you don't have to go there, it's a huge advantage to any team. They have enough pitching to make things complicated. Like their starters are pretty solid. The depth of the team is not great. And they're a team that is good enough to really make you work for it. But like what happened last weekend, they lose 3 one-run games at Duke. And I feel like that's a little bit representative of what we've seen, again, when they're away from home, is that they're still going to play you tough, but if you're good, you should be able to eventually put them away.
Teddy, greatly appreciate you taking the time. It's nice to have buzz around the Florida State baseball program. It's been a minute for me covering the team, and I'm sure you would say college baseball is better when Florida State's playing at a high level.
I mean, I certainly enjoy it. Like, anytime you have one of these blue bloods, or however we're going to classify a program like Florida State, like it's a lot of fun. I mean, they bring a lot of excitement. Like if they sell out this weekend, or come, sell out a couple of the games at least this weekend, like that's going to be a really cool environment. And so anytime you can see a team, a program like that get back on track, I mean, you have to appreciate it from a national level.
No, yeah, it's unfortunately Florida State, pretty much a lot of their best series are on the road. I'm not sure we're going to get you down to Hauser, but hopefully at some point we'll get you back after you're there opening day. Thanks so much, Teddy.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Curt.